Imagine you find yourself on some sort of machine. You're on it and it's going over 200 miles an hour. You can look outside, you can kind of feel it, and it's on rails. It's not quite a roller coaster. You're still able to get up and move about and look outside. But yet you can feel you're moving, but you can't really feel the effects, and you wouldn't really guess you're going 200 miles an hour. You look outside and you get a good view. What might you find yourself on? What you'd find yourself on is actually a high-speed train. These high-speed trains actually are very common throughout the world. You actually find them all over the world. You see them in Asia and Europe. They travel, each of them, usually over 200 miles an hour, and allow you to get from point A to point B pretty quick. I found them to be pretty interesting things. I bring that up because there's a trend going on in the automotive industry that is trending down. Sales throughout the country, and not just the country, but the world, have been much lower. In the past 10 years, this is the lowest they have dipped in recent memory. Now, there are many different reasons as to why people might not be buying as many cars now as they have in the past. Some of those reasons might be they're worried about emissions. People with electrical cars might be having a hard time finding charging stations. People might not want to pay for gas. There might not even be as much of a demand as there has been. But I'm not going to spend too much time today talking about why these trends are happening. But it really brought up a focal point of I was thinking, was speaking of mass transit. Why do we not have fast trains, high-speed rail, bullet trains, when the rest of the world does? Why here in the United States do we not have these things? So I wanted to take a look at some of the points that I found why they would be beneficial here in our country. Now, recently I took a train from northern Washington to Seattle, and this train ride is about 2.5 hours, about 45 minutes longer than the actual drive from there to Seattle. I didn't have to do any of the driving, which was nice. I was able to take in the views, and I didn't have to worry about any of the traffic as I went during the usual rush hour time. Now, it was a little longer, and it might be because the trains in the United States for most places are only allowed to go to a max of 79 miles per hour. This time also included the stops when we stopped at each station. Overall, I thought it was a great experience, and I really think that throughout the country, these high-speed trains could really be beneficial for us. I think it would be able to really help our economy by linking and bridging together areas that are a little too far away to drive and a little too close to fly. They'd be able to travel back and forth rather easily. It would also be able to lower down our carbon footprint, lower our emissions. And it would also help us stabilize our current infrastructure and allow us to make necessary improvements and allow us to not maybe necessarily need to improve and repair our infrastructure as often. So as I said, my first points I wanted to bring up were that it could help bridge together different economies together that are a little too far to drive and a little too close to fly. These high-speed trains travel at over 200 miles an hour. In fact, that is what the definition of a high-speed train is. So I have a couple different maps here. This is the Pacific Northwest, ranging from Portland to Vancouver, and on the right is from Houston to Dallas. Now, an interesting thing in both these places, they are talking about plans of putting together high-speed rail systems. From Portland to Seattle, it is about a 3.5-hour drive. From Seattle to Vancouver, also about a 3.5-hour drive. As well as from Houston to Dallas, also a 3.5-hour drive. Now, if each of those, if they were to build a high-speed rails there, they'd be able to make a trip from one of those places to the other in about 50 minutes. Much faster, and would turn a 3.5-hour commute, which is unrealistic, into something that is very realistic. Microsoft has actually been looking into this as well. In fact, Microsoft's research suggests there could be a $355 billion growth to the economy in the Cascadia region. This would be by linking those regions together from Vancouver to Seattle or Seattle to Portland, any one of those places, by taking this high-speed rail, therefore shortening those commute times, would create jobs, allowing people to work in different places they weren't able to work before. If there was a job in Vancouver and you lived in Seattle that wasn't available in the area, you'd be able to take that position because that commute would no longer be a problem. Now, doing this, like I said, would open jobs, and if we were to create more of these different scenarios around the country, it would greatly improve our economy. Now, not only does this help with economics, it also would help with a little bit of when it would come to tourism. You'd be able to travel from these places because, as mentioned, they're a little too far to drive, but they're also a little too close to fly, and this would help balance things out. Now, the governor of Washington actually found this would be a very good boost for their economy as well. Jay Inslee, the governor of Washington State, said, "The prospect of uniting Washington, Oregon, and British Columbia with an ultra-high-speed transportation system that propels us into the future is incredibly exciting. Imagine fast, frequent, and reliable travel with the potential for zero emissions and the opportunity to better compete in a global economy. It could transform the Pacific Northwest." And not only would this transform the Pacific Northwest, but it could also transform the country, it could transform the world by creating positions and lowering commutes to these different places so they'd actually be accessible for us to be able to take and use now. So for me, this giant boost to our economy would far exceed any potential cost there would be of creating these high-speed rails. This brings me to my next point as far as different things that we could use are beneficial from high-speed rail. Now, these trains actually run off of electricity. A lot of us are worried about the cost and how much it would cost to fuel these trains and what are, the pollution impacts of this. Now, like I said, they run off of electricity. Many of them actually come from renewable electric sources. Around the world, I can't think of any from during my research that actually ran off of diesel fuel or any types of fossil fuels. They were all electric. This makes riding these trains green. A lot of people would actually be very interested in doing that because of that fact. Now, the real benefit from this is by us not driving our cars everywhere that we needed to go. We'd be able to take our trains instead. Now, by carpooling, be able to go, we wouldn't be driving our vehicles, using our own gas, and helping to add to that by burning fuel. I did some research as to how energy efficient these trains would be. And from what I found, these high-speed trains, it might not sound much, but added up, this is quite a bit. Trains themselves take 30% less energy per passenger mile than it would be if those passengers were taking cars. This is even more efficient than when passengers take planes. Now, I'm not suggesting to take high-speed trains instead of planes. This is just kind of that middle area where you could travel instead. Now, if I took a train, even if I had to pay for a monthly pass I'd have to pay, I think of all the gas money I would be saving. If I worked up in Salt Lake, I'd be expecting to pay at least $50 a week on gas. Now, not only that, I'm actually burning that gas and adding that to our carbon footprint as well. By taking a train, one, I wouldn't have to worry about that commute. It'd be taken care of for me, but I wouldn't be having to spend that money on gas as well. So I think that amongst a lot of other people doing this could really help benefit our environment here. The third point I wanted to bring up is infrastructure. Our country's infrastructure is incredibly compact. If you look around many of these pictures, whether it's Seattle, Dallas, or Houston, it is completely full. You look at them, and this is peak rush hour in many of these places. Now, you don't drive in rush hour all the time, but it's some of the most stressful, annoying times that we could have by sitting there in lines with these cars, trying to get to work or just trying to get home after a long day. This is because we can only fit so many people on our current infrastructure system. Whether we can't fit enough due to the current size, or whether it's under construction, as I find here in Utah, the freeways are under perpetual construction all the time. They're always being upgraded or repaired. In fact, our current freeway system was designed in 1956 by President Eisenhower. Now, the freeways in urban areas, as I mentioned, are always being updated to allow for more people to drive. Now, when these infrastructure systems are being updated, as I mentioned, it can be a real pain to get home, especially after a long day. They're always having to be repaired, expanded upon, or worked on, so we continue to use them because more and more people are going to be driving them. Now, with high-speed rail, we wouldn't have to worry about this. Trains eliminate a bunch of these issues from happening. I believe lowering the usage on these roads would also lower the need for repairs on them or how often they would need to come into effect. I believe also by lowering the usage on these roads, when there was traffic on there due to ongoing construction, it would be lighter because there would be less cars there waiting, lowering the amount of slow and how far back that slow would indeed go. And as I mentioned, we would not have to repair them as much. We could also probably make more changes as needed because the traffic would be lighter. And I think by doing so, this would add more value to our current national infrastructure that we have with our freeways and highways because more people would be using the high-speed rail. So in summary, I believe our current system would greatly benefit from having high-speed rail in our country. Yes, it does take a lot of money to get set up and running because a lot of infrastructure is needed and a lot to set up the rails and set up the pathways needed to run these. But in years, we'll be able to go ahead and start making money off of these trains as well as lowering our carbon footprint, by lowering the emissions needed by taking these trains. We'd also be bringing a huge boost to our economy by bringing together economies from different parts of the country together, allowing people to work in both and uniting the people that were working there. Tourism will also benefit from this as well. We'd also be able to improve our infrastructure due to the lack of number of people that were on there using it because they were instead using high-speed rails. I think we would be remiss not to go ahead and follow suit with the rest of the world and not making our own system of high-speed rail. Now, I am one of those people who agrees with the many groups in our country trying to put together a system of high-speed rail. A lot of these are privately funded. I think we need to be riding these bullet trains into the future. I'm not sure if anybody else is interested, but you can count me in because I feel like this would be a great boost to our economy. Thank you very much.